In the early 1990s, the video game industry was ruled by one absolute king, Nintendo. Sony, a tech giant famous for TVs and the Walkman, wanted in on the action. They signed a secret contract with Nintendo to build a revolutionary CD-ROM add-on for the Super Nintendo. It was supposed to be a marriage of tech titans. Sony's lead engineer, Ken Kutaragi, poured his soul into the project. But then, the unthinkable happened. At the 1991 Consumer Electronics Show, just one day after Sony proudly announced their partnership, Nintendo blindsided the world. Fearing Sony would take too much control over game licensing, Nintendo secretly broke the deal and publicly partnered with Sony's rival, Philips. It was a brutal public humiliation for Sony. Executives wanted to retreat and pull out of gaming entirely to save face. But Ken Kutaragi stood up in the boardroom. Furious and deeply insulted, he made a legendary vow: "We will build it ourselves." Sony channeled that burning desire for revenge into creating a standalone console. In December 1994, the original gray PlayStation was born. Armed with cutting-edge 3D graphics, a CD format that made games cheaper to produce, and a brilliant marketing campaign targeting cool teenagers instead of little kids, Sony didn't just enter the market. They launched a revolution. By the end of the generation, the PlayStation 1 had sold over 100 million units, dethroning Nintendo and changing pop culture forever.
The dream of revenge.
Debut console in history. If you're Sony, you don't just upgrade the graphics, you change the entire concept of the living room. Enter the year 2000 and the arrival of the PlayStation 2. On paper, the PS2 was competing against Sega's Dreamcast, Nintendo's GameCube, and a terrifying new challenger from America, Microsoft's Xbox. But Sony had a secret weapon that felt like a cheat code. They included a built-in DVD player. At the time, standalone DVD players cost up to $400. Sony launched the PS2 at just $299. Parents who didn't care about video games suddenly bought the PS2 because it was the cheapest movie player on the market. It was a brilliant Trojan horse strategy. Once the PS2 was inside millions of homes, the games did the rest of the talking. This era gave birth to an unstoppable lineup of software. We saw the open-world madness of Grand Theft Auto 3, the cinematic depth of Metal Gear Solid 2, and the brutal, epic fury of a new character named Kratos in God of War. The PS2 became a global phenomenon, with gamers lining up around blocks at midnight just to get their hands on one. It remained in production for an astounding 13 years, ultimately selling over 155 million units. To this day, it stands as the best-selling video game console of all time, a towering empire that has never been matched.
Sony's didn't just play games, it played DVDs, making a Trojan horse that conquered living rooms worldwide. By marketing it as the ultimate home entertainment center, Sony had been sure to make a family staple, blending movies and gaming into one seamless experience. From message clear, console for everyone, dominating the market and establishing unmatched legs.
PS2, Sony launched the PlayStation 3. But this time, they made two fatal mistakes: a staggering price tag of $599 and an incredibly complex custom architecture called the Cell Processor. Game developers hated working with the Cell chip. Multi-platform games looked worse on PS3 than on the cheaper Xbox 360. For the first few years, the PS3 was a disaster. Sony was losing billions of dollars, and Microsoft was rapidly stealing their market share. The king had fallen, and the crown was slipping away. But a true champion is defined by how they handle defeat. Sony underwent a massive corporate shakeup, brought in fresh leadership, and stopped focusing on complex hardware specs. Instead, they focused on what truly matters: unforgettable, emotional stories. Sony invested heavily in its first-party studios. They unleashed Naughty Dog to create the cinematic treasure-hunting masterpiece Uncharted, followed by what many consider the greatest video game story ever told, The Last of Us. These deep, narrative-driven, single-player exclusives became Sony's signature brand identity. By the end of the generation, through sheer creative force and a dedication to storytelling, Sony managed to claw their way back, eventually outselling Xbox 360 globally in the final hours of the console war. It was a hard-earned lesson in humility.
PlayStation launched with complex tech and a high price, nearly derailing the brand. Its redemption not from processing power, Sony-based immersive story and creating from unmatched masters of adventure. This focusment through stories turned complex hardware for emotional, solidifying that as the home of premium single-player.
Lesson from the PS3, Sony entered 2013 with a simple, powerful slogan for the PlayStation 4, for the players. While Microsoft stumbled by trying to turn the Xbox One into an expensive TV cable box, Sony focused purely on pure high-performance gaming at an affordable price. The strategy worked perfectly. The PS4 dominated the generation from day one. It became the home of generation-defining masterpieces like God of War 2018, Horizon Zero Dawn, and Spider-Man. It fostered a massive global community of friends playing together on their couches and online, resulting in over 117 million units sold. And that brings us to the modern era, the PlayStation 5. Launched in late 2020 amidst a chaotic global supply shortage, the PS5 looked like a spaceship and promised a true generational leap. Powered by a lightning-fast custom SSD, it completely eliminated loading screens, while the DualSense controller allowed players to actually feel the tension of a bowstring or the rain falling in a game. Today, as PlayStation moves past its 30th anniversary, the landscape is changing again. Sony faces massive tech shifts, from cloud streaming and mobile gaming to Microsoft's multi-billion-dollar studio acquisitions. But from a rejected gray box, born out of a broken promise to a dominant cultural empire, PlayStation has proven one thing over the last 3 decades. As long as they put great games and unforgettable experiences first, greatness awaits.
The journey doesn't end with a box under the TV. The next era of PlayStation is expanding into a sprawling ecosystem, connecting players across all boundaries, mobile and mobile, aiming to create a universe of shared play where anyone, anywhere can find their